Nick Murphy, director of A Spy Among Friends. This is a true story about two spies, one of whom was a double agent for the Soviets. How familiar were you with this story before the show?
Well, everybody in the UK has heard of Kim Philby. Kim Philby was the spy you're talking about who betrayed Britain. He worked for the Russians for 30 years whilst at the very, very top of the British intelligence. So I sort of knew about him. I didn't know the details about it. It's based on a very well-regarded book by Ben McIntyre, and it was interesting hearing Jess talk earlier about his source material and the enormous 900-page thing that he had the decency to read. I never read the book because I kind of felt, no, it wasn't through laziness, although I don't read well. I didn't know enough about the story, and I wanted to keep it that way. In the sense, I wanted the script to be what I worked with. There was people, the set was smothered with people who'd read the book, not least Alex Carey, who was always with me, or the writer and showrunner on the show, who was always with me on set and all that sort of stuff. So there was a high level of awareness and expertise in the subject, and I suppose I saw myself as the "what if you don't know" sort of figure on it.
Yeah, I think that's fitting because it's kind of like the audience too, especially people who are not familiar with the story, and it's kind of.
I think there's a load you can take for granted. Yeah, well, I've made a lot of factual dramas, and there's a lot you can take for granted. You have to work on the assumption. One of my first dramas was about Chernobyl many years ago before the big one. And you had to work on the assumption nobody had heard of Chernobyl and this sort of thing. It's a danger, and nobody is going to inherently feel it's dramatic just because it's a subject that they're supposed to know about. And I've got to also say that our drama was more the spy craft of the story was the infrastructure, the skeleton of the story, but it was really a story about friendship and this sort of betrayal of this platonic.
Yeah, there's no spycraft or actual mission there.
Yeah, and deliberately so. And yes, of course there was, because he escaped to Russia under very, very dubious circumstances, typical of the British ruling classes. They couldn't believe that one of their own was guilty. So they when they found out he was guilty, rather than just arrest him, they sent his best friend to Beirut to interrogate him, have a jolly good chat. In a safe house in Beirut for 4 days, after which he escaped. So there is a sort of an enormous question hanging over Damien's character, Nicholas Elliott. What the hell happened in Beirut? So there is a spy story, but principally woven within that is this story of heartbreak, where they both analyze the meaning of their friendship.
Yeah, and the show jumps through time through 30 years, and a ton of locations, like Beirut, like you're saying, London, Istanbul, Moscow, and
London, Moscow, Berlin, Vienna.
But what I love about it was that you guys didn't even bother doing chyrons to situate the viewer. You told it visually.
Do you know what? We didn't. We jump around. It's a non-linear story, and we very early decided not to do that. I used to make documentaries, and we'd constantly put the name of the person talking up, and we'd say this and that. No one ever read them. No one ever read. You don't need to pause a documentary and go, his name is Professor so and so, and her name is Professor so and so. We were jumping around so much that it was actually going to be unhelpful, in the sense of people are constantly looking down, and so instead I went for a visual code of a sort of slight grade difference. We were emulating film stocks for different eras. The whole thing's set in 1963. Principally, the story is set in 1963. So we emulated Kodachrome 64, and then reversal stock for Beirut, and then Ektachrome 100 for a different stock for Moscow. So you feel the change, and plus design changes, and Paul Spriggs, the designer, sort of made sure that there was a sort of manifest change in palette and that sort of stuff, very subtle. And then, so ultimately in the story, you don't need to know dates. You just need to know it happened before or it happened after.
Right.
And I think
it's a fitting choice, because it is like the framing device is Lily, a composite character, interrogating Damien mostly, and it's his character trying to just like recalibrate his whole relationship with Kim, like, and figure it out. And he in his mind is not going to think about it linearly himself either.
Well, memory doesn't. I was interested in the whole thing about the way memory works, and this is why the memories we have in the show are mute. I've got this feeling that I don't think memories have sound for some reason, and so that these images that roll through people's minds are always never sublimate the audio of the present scene. but the invented character of Lily was in deliberately to create a foil, to present the alternative of what these men and their lives were, which is male, white, toxic, in all those ways. And this woman was everything that represents the future for, and the service had to become, intelligence service had to become more like her and less like what had caused the problems, whether it has or not. You don't need to look far beyond Boris Johnson's term in office to know that we still have the same problem. But nonetheless, that was the point that Alex was trying to make.
Mm-hmm. I also like that you basically see like inverted relationships between the three of them, because it's like one relationship or friendship destroyed with Kim and Nick, and then he and Lily eventually become friends by the end. It's like he kind of warms up to her by the end of the show. So what was that something you guys were thinking about too, just showing how
absolutely there's those two ships pass. I mean, what was important is that we felt that the audience are the ones that spot all that. When you are making a constructed deceit like that, it's important the audience feel the authors of it, and so that the entire, this goes for the drama in general, the relationship between the camera and the story was really one of eyewitness. It wasn't one of storyteller. It's interesting to hear talking about Power of Rings, which is that you are a storyteller, and that's very much part of the strength of it. This is much more of a, you're in the room with people with a problem, and what you infer from that, and you only learn it as they learn it. We at no stage does the camera know more than the characters in question, for example. So that those sort of formations of friendships, you feel you're the one that's spotting it, and that remained important from the outset, that we never overstepped our brief in sense of people are trying to get a measure of the situation. I didn't want the filmmaker to feel more in control than the characters were. That makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I don't believe you've worked with Damien before, have you?
No, we got on very well, Damien and I, very quickly. We support the same football team, which doesn't hurt. Let me tell you, if you know a little
That's
bit
how
about
you
English
bonded.
culture.
So
Right, we bonded at Anfield in Liverpool. No, I haven't, but I worked with Guy before. Guy and I did a Christmas Carol for FX a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. He played Scrooge in Steve Knight's show of that. So he and I knew each other, and we're already very close and trusting. And Damien is very well, he was a producer on the show as well. So my creative relationship with him was very long within the schedule. I wasn't just gaining an actor in the last week of rehearsal. I had him from the outset, and indeed he had me. So we got very close in that way, and still are.
Yeah, because I was wondering, like, what was it like working with him as like throughout the production, because he does have to play this character who's and he does it so well, like he's just confused about this betrayal by his friend.
Yeah, he's a nightmare. He's a nightmare. No, he's delicious. He's delightful. Well, I think what's extraordinary about his character, and this goes for a lot of the sort of posh culture, that English culture that is well documented, is it doesn't express emotion well. They don't gush. And so Damien had the unenviable task of being the emotional core for the audience, the emotional sort of barometer for the audience in terms of the impact it's having on him. Nobody is there discussing his feelings. So you are only going off what he is giving you, but he is playing a man who doesn't give off much. So those two things are completely in conflict. And I think that's what he managed extremely well. What I will say is, he, having grown up, lucky enough to grow up in a very similar, he went to the same school as these guys. He knows that type. I also went to a private boarding school in England, and we know that type. And so that the traits that we could use to tell our story were known to us, even though we couldn't codify them. We both knew we both knew the people that we were depicting, even if we didn't necessarily calibrate and codify empirically what it was these people are.
Right.
And indeed, Lily, for her part, is I don't know how well she's known in America. She's a phenomenally well-known, well-regarded actress here, and is purely intuitive and purely in the moment. So all three behave in very different ways on set. Their process is very different. But as the other guys will tell you, that can often really help the dynamic between cast if they're all working in different ways. It's not always simpatico that works. It's they all got on very, very well socially, but their approach was very different, and that I think helped us.
For sure. Well, Nick, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you back in
Great.
a little bit. Thank you.